I sure do wish I knew someone who's been in my position before, but with a little bit more experience. Actually, a lot of bit more experience. I'm just so stressed. It'd be so helpful to have some guidance and someone to talk to, and bounce ideas around. Barry, it sounds like you could use a mentor. A mentor? What's that? Well, let me tell you a little bit about it. Hi, I'm Michelle Magnan, and this is my reflection video from this week's readings on mentoring. So, what is a mentor and what is mentoring? Mentoring, by my definition, would be where there is a supportive relationship that involves a mentor and a mentee. The mentor is an advisor to the mentee and aids them in meeting their personal goal or professional goal. Mentors guide and encourage through using their own knowledge base to help their mentee grow and learn. And as noted in one of the readings this week, mentoring typically involves an intense relationship where there is a senior or someone who is more experienced and a junior or a protege, someone who is less experienced. And in this relationship, there is advice, which I learned a little bit more about how to give that, counseling, developmental opportunities that help to shape the protege's career experience or personal experience by developing that learning relationship between the two of them. Also, in the reading, what was an important subject, I think, to talk about would be how knowledge is transferred to both parties and can be compartmentalized into three different areas: training, socialization, and mentoring. Where training is more structured and socialization can be more personal, mentoring, in my opinion, would be more of a balance between the two, where there is a structured but yet personal relationship that is developed so that both parties can learn and grow. In the video, I found that this was one of the most impactful parts of the module because Garvey did a really great job of explaining what mentoring is and how it functions. The most important thing that I saw that he stressed within that made me think about mentoring and its process and its structure is setting ground rules for the mentoring relationship in order to provide mutually exclusive feedback from one to the other. And that means setting norms that are referred back to on a regular basis. There needs to be boundaries set within the mentoring relationship about contact, what will be covered when they're meeting, when will the mentorship end, and all of that. And that starts with a chemistry meeting and getting to know the other person and getting to know what it is they're looking for and what their goals are and where they're from and their background, because all of that comes into play when you're going through a mentoring process. The diversity aspect of each person is ingrained in what makes them tick and what makes them want to grow and how they learn. And that's an important process to get to know from each part of a mentoring relationship so that it can be successful. Then Garvey goes on to explain the steps of the mentoring relationship that go back and forth, kind of like a rotating thing that can be nonlinear. And the steps in that process are exploration, where there's a lot of questioning, and most importantly, listening. A lot of open-ended questions, which allow for a deeper amount of thought and opens up a space for dialogue. Then there's a stage of understanding where there's an expansion of understanding and there's new understanding that can take place based on what's talked about and what is experienced based on their relationship. And lastly, there's action. And that's where they sit together and make next steps and talk about what's the action plan to improve or to move on. And through listening to Garvey's video, it really, as he talked about mentoring, reminded me of Bloom's taxonomy that was inside of the module, as far as creating that relationship, evaluating what's working, what's not, how are the norms being adhered to, analyzing that, and then applying a change. And also the understanding process in mentoring, which goes into Bloom's taxonomy, is also their understanding and making sure that both parties are having open communication and that they're able to understand their different point of views and what can be done to unlock new understanding and to move on forward effectively. Also remembering and going back to that exploration part, and I would say inside of Garvey's video, to remember things that have already been covered, also remembering experiences that either the mentor or the mentee has had in order to better develop their relationship. One of the things that I learned that would be the most important aspect of mentoring would be discourse. That is the first thing that the text talked about when opening up, is the different types of discourse, whether it be soul guide, which is more personal, or managerial, which is more of a structured kind of discourse. Communication is key to developing a successful mentoring relationship, and discourse in deciding which kind of discourse is appropriate for the mentoring relationship is also important. A major goal of mentoring is to foster independence. And I thought that this was something important to point out, because there are ways in which a mentoring relationship can be an enabling relationship, which is something that was discussed in the WebEx as well as inside of discussion board. And it's important to steer away from being an enabling mentor and to go and save your mentee, or to keep them from being able to be independent and develop their own problem-solving skills. And so with that being said, it's important to have guidelines that Garvey talked about set. What is expected from the mentoring relationship? What should the mentee be doing in order to solve their own problems and build their own skills on their own based off of the knowledge that the mentor may have imparted in discourse with each other? Throughout the readings, the components I found of mentoring would be open communication, observation, feedback, trust, planning, and reflecting. All of these areas work together inside of a mentoring relationship and have their own personal role that they play inside of the relationship. Building a mentoring relationship is one that should be fostered on both parties being able to learn, reflect, and trust one another. The most important aspect of mentoring for me, I would say, would be trust, planning, and open communication. Because in my mind, I think that correlates well to Garvey's 3-step process. Communication being the most important, where that those 3 steps of exploration, understanding, and action can take place. The planning, which involves setting boundaries, making sure that both parties are on the same page and know what to expect. And then reflecting and being able to give feedback to one another and making sure that they're sharing experiences that are valuable and meaningful to the relationship. I find it important to mention that throughout this time and these readings and these videos, thinking about mentoring before, I thought about giving advice and being a person of kind of like a soundboard for other people. Although that is the case for a mentoring relationship, I found now that it is better not to give advice or to tell someone else what they should do, but to share experiences and to let those experiences shape a discourse for learning and have mentees be able to come to conclusions of what they think that they should do on their own based off of their experiences and the experiences that a mentor may be sharing. Through reading the discussion board, there were some commonalities and some themes that went through mostly everyone's components of mentoring. And the ones that seemed to stand out the most were trust. Being able to trust one another is a very important component of mentoring, as well as openness and vulnerability. Being able to make sure that there's authentic communication between the two, being able to share things about successes and failures so that each will be able to grow, as well as time. At first, for me and my personal mentoring relationship experiences as a mentee, I thought that time was something so structured because of a professional relationship with mentoring. That made me want to look up more personal relationships and how mentoring programs go in that aspect, where there seems to still be a consistent requirement of spending time and having planned out time. I looked up 2 organizations in which I'm familiar, such as Boys and Girls Club and Big Brother Big Sister, in which both for guidelines of becoming a mentor have stated that set times per month or per week to meet up and plan and talk and discuss are important to building that mentoring relationship between the 2 parties. Learning was also a theme that was seen in the Blackboard discussion post. And that is kind of speaks for itself, whether it's professional learning, someone who's helping you academically, or even like Big Brother, Big Sister, or Boys and Girls Club, where it's a relationship that helps you build social skills and think about planning for the future and more of a personal mentoring relationship where there's still those guidelines and those boundaries that should be set in place before a different goal in mind in the end. Reflecting was also a theme through the discussion board post, as well as listening. And all of those throughout the reading and throughout this module have shown to be very important factors of mentoring. Lastly, there were a few areas that weren't seen on a lot of components for our class, and those were confidentiality, authenticity or genuineness, and as well as awareness of language practices. Those stood out to me because they were something that didn't reoccur within the Blackboard discussion, but also because they were very important to mentoring as well. Garvey touched on confidentiality somewhat in his video as well, and how that's important, and making sure there's an established guideline of what can be shared, what's expected between the relationship, and what needs to stay private. I thought it was also great to think about the language practices, not only thinking about diversity as far as language barriers inside of a relationship, but also the vernacular terms and the way that things are said inside of a mentoring relationship. Going back to the types of discourse and thinking about how the relationship is built and what kind of mentoring relationship is established, thinking about the awareness of language practices is very important to making sure that there's trust and that there is understanding and that the relationship flows successfully. Overall, there was so much that was learned on mentoring this week, and I was thrilled to be able to learn all of this as well as reflect on it. And I can't wait to continue on in the course and see what else there is to learn and look more into the differences between the other two components.